Good afternoon and welcome to BizTech's ASEAN Midday Market Watch. Our guest today is Jeff Halley. He's a Senior Market Analyst, Asia Pacific at Owanda. Hey Jeff, great to have you on the show again. Good afternoon.
Hey, thanks for having me. Happy Monday.
Yeah, okay. Before we get your insights, Jeff, let's take a look at how markets across the region are performing. And we've got a sea of green across the region. The Nikkei is up 0.44% at 28,757.34. The Shanghai Composite is up 0.56% at 3,627.01. The Hang Seng is at 30,057.01. It's up sharply 2.07%. The ASX 200 is up 0.26% at 6,817.8. The Kospi is up 1.95% to 3,001.77. Closer to home, we've got the Bursa Malaysia trading slightly down, bucking the trend at 0.26% at 1,592.55. And rounding off, we've got the SGX, which is also bucking the trend, down 0.23% to 2,984.68. Jeff, what's your read on how markets are performing in the first half of the day?
Yeah, there's a definite ASEAN, Northern Asia divide today. The news story that came out, I think last night, that China had overtaken the US as the #1 foreign direct investment destination, has lifted all of those countries neighboring China on this recovery story, and China going from strength to strength. So all those countries that are geographically adjacent in China's event horizon, South Korea, Japan, and China itself have all moved higher today, Taiwan, etc. In Hong Kong, we've seen an outsized performance as we see China retail flows coming down that equity pipeline from the mainland to Hong Kong and jumping into China tech stocks, most of which are actually listed in Hong Kong and not on the mainland. So if you want a piece of the China tech story, that's where the money all flows into, and I think that's the sort of flows we're seeing there. Australia has also performed quite well. It has a very high beta to China despite the ructions or quarrels at the moment, so those markets have moved higher. But ASEAN, sort of Indonesia, Kuala Lumpur, Singapore, Jakarta, Bangkok, those markets are really following the US from Friday, which was a bit of a nondescript negative session where investors took risk off the table.
Now, talking about risk off the table, Jeff, there's a real disconnect with what is happening in the real economy versus what's happening in markets. And there's been a lot of talk about it. So E-Trade did recently a survey of millionaires with over $1 million at least invested in markets. Now that survey actually came up with some interesting results. Now 9% think that only 9% think that the market is nowhere near a bubble. 16% think that we're fully in a bubble. 46%, which is the biggest chunk, says we're somewhat in a bubble, but 26% think that the market is approaching one. So what's your read on equity markets right now in 2021?
Well, I believe equity markets are buyers on dips. Now, we could get a correction lower. I'm not saying we won't. And the catalyst for that could be the slower than expected vaccine rollout, where the world seems to think that the vaccines are all going to appear in 2 months and life will be normal by March. That was naive and hopefully incorrect. But also the passage of the 1.9 trillion stimulus package through the US Senate. Now, early indications are that that won't be as simple as the markets have been pricing in. They've been pricing in that Joe Biden would send out the bill and then both houses would just sign it off and all is well in the world. That's not how it's going to be, and I think it will come out substantially smaller by the time the US Republicans have finished. I won't go into the nuances of how they can block it or why or whatever. It does actually give you a bit of a headache when you look at the procedures. Nevertheless, monetary policy around the world is at 0% or near to it, and it will stay that way. There's still a flood of money flowing into the markets. quantitative easing is going on all over the world. That's not going to stop, despite the noises and these tapering comments that we saw in some news stories over the weekend, which are, I think, hopelessly naive. At the end of the day, there's a flood of 0% money floating around in the world looking for a home, and that is going to support asset prices. It's going to support property prices, and it's going to support stock markets. So that money has to go somewhere. Investors are looking for a return in a 0% world. They can't put it in the bank. It's going to the stock market. So despite the fact that we could have a correction, maybe we could have a 15% correction, it's still a buy on dips, and it will be all through to 2021.
All right, got you. Buy on dips. Now, looking ahead this week, what key meetings, and obviously the FOMC meeting stands out on Wednesday, announcements and data releases should we be looking out for in this coming week that will move markets?
Well, in Asia, we have China industrial profits on Wednesday. That usually is enough for a short-term spike in volatility, and I expect those numbers to be great, just like the data for the last year has been. We have GDPs from around Asia and also through the United States and parts of Europe. But actually, Brian, the one ring to rule them all will be the FOMC meeting. And most particularly, it'll be the comments that Jerome Powell makes at the press conference afterwards. That'll be Thursday morning, early our time. And he should reiterate a very, very dovish stance, because markets are now there is starting to be talk about tapering. Now, that's a ridiculous concept in my mind to even think about in 2021. Nevertheless, the market is the market, and if they get hold of it, we've seen what happens with taper tantrums from the Yellen years. I think it was 2016, was it? Where we had that
2017, yeah.
Now we have 4 more years of ultra loose monetary policy and very inflated asset prices. So I dread to think what a taper tantrum would look like now. I think they'll do their very, very best to avoid that, and I'm expecting the FOMC to be very, very dovish. That should be good for markets towards the end of the week.
Now, thank you very much for your insights, Jeff.
My pleasure, always.
Now, we've been speaking to Jeff Halley, Senior Market Analyst, Asia Pacific at Owanda, on BizTech's ASEAN Midday Market Watch. I'm Brian Fernandez. Check out www.biztech.asia for business and technology conversations.